They have a blog that runs, they change every day, the text changes every day. I read it to them about this time last year. I was real impressed with them. They do a really nice job. Today, I was asked to speak about this book, Richmond Shall Not Be Given Up. It's probably a subject you guys know a lot about. I hope I can tell you some stuff you might not have heard before, or read you some accounts you might not have heard before. So, anyway, the title is interesting. The title, does anybody know where the title came from? Richmond Shall Not Be Given Up.
Sounds like something Robert E. Lee would have said.
Absolutely. Joe Johnston, well, I'll come to it. Joe Johnston wanted to pull up the peninsula, and he was thinking about abandoning Richmond. And Robert E. Lee got very emotional and said, best I can do it, Richmond shall not be given up. And I thought it was so powerful. I thought it was a good title for a book name. That's what this is all about. All right? So, if you will, it's late May 1862. George McClellan, as you probably all know, is outside the gates of Richmond with over 100,000 men, 288 pieces of artillery, some of them heavy siege artillery. There's 30 to 40,000 more men in the Fredericksburg and Northern Virginia area set to come down here. Now, McClellan's overall strategy of assembling such a large army, which is the largest army ever seen in North America at that time, was to overwhelm the Confederates, to show the North had so much power that there's no hope in resisting it. He did not want to damage Confederate property. He wanted the North to be seen as benign. He wanted the people just to want to come back. All he wanted was put the Union back together. He planned to take Richmond and keep going south, take cities, and put the Union back together. And above all, he had no interest in slavery whatsoever. He didn't want to damage anything. He just wanted to put his friends back together. That's all he wanted to do. He wanted to have as little bloodshed as possible. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Facing him is Joe Johnston, just outside the gates, if you will. Johnston's in red. Johnston has retreated up the peninsula from Yorktown and Williamsburg, and you can kind of see why. If you look at the rivers on his flanks, it's not very defensible down there. Lee actually wanted him to fight down there, but it's not defensible because the Union could do an end run. If you look at where it says May 7th, up around West Point at Eltham's Landing, they actually did do an end run. It was a little late, but the idea was they were going to come and pull like a MacArthur in the Korean War, come in on their flank and rear. So he felt he should pull back and get right behind the Chickahominy River right outside of Richmond. But this presents problems. Now, at the time, you're probably all aware, this is a very dark time for the Confederacy. They've lost Fort Henry and Donelson in the west. They've lost Nashville. They've lost the Battle of Shiloh. They've lost most of Tennessee. They've lost most of the Mississippi. They've lost their largest city, New Orleans. They've lost most of the North Carolina coast. They've lost Virginia up to Richmond and down to Fredericksburg. What they can't stand is to lose their capital, not just for psychological reasons. You got places like the Treader Iron Works in there. You know, a lot of manufacturing is in Richmond. It's one of the main manufacturing cities in the South. They cannot afford to lose Richmond, and Johnston is on the brink of it. Now, for all the things in his favor, McClellan has three main problems. First is, the Army up in Fredericksburg will never appear. Now, one of his corps is an Irvin McDowell from Bull Run, and his plan was then to come down and join him. They're just going to crush Richmond with about 150,000 men. The Lincoln administration, again, as you probably know, is very paranoid that the South is going to bring some men up north and threaten Washington. Where they're coming from, I don't know, but they're convinced it's going to happen. They're not keen on the Peninsula campaign at all. So they tell him, you've got to leave troops in Washington. So he leaves thousands of troops in Washington, and you've got to leave troops in Fredericksburg. In late May, they finally released that group to come to Richmond, and that day they turn around and order them back. Because Stonewall Jackson in the valley is causing such concern, they want to make sure those troops stay up there. So McClellan's not going to get those troops. Now the second problem I have, there it is, right there. See the Chickahominy River, right? If you'll notice, there's 3 Union Corps above the river and 2 south of the river. Not a very good military plan. You don't want your army divided by a river. So why would he do that? Well, he's trying to take Richmond, but he's also got to reach these guys coming down for Fredericksburg. So he wants to reach out to them. He also has a base at White House, which is one of Robert E. Lee's wife's ancestral homes. I understand that George Washington was married there. Does anybody know if that's correct?
there's dispute between whether it was there. Robert E. Lee says it was at St. Peter's Parish Church, but I
Yeah.
think he was actually married at the White House.
And they're close,
House.
close together. So, yeah. Anyway, he's got a base there, and he's got this railroad, and the railroad is key not only to supply him, but to move his heavy artillery up. Because I talked about McClellan's strategy, his tactics are going to be to bring his heavy artillery as close as he can to Richmond and shell Richmond and drive the Confederates out. The last thing he wants to do is have a pitched battle and sacrifice his army. So he's going to use his heavy guns, and he's going to take Richmond. So Johnston is standing there at the end of May, and he's in a terrible predicament. And what am I going to do? I've got 65,000 men. How am I going to drive these guys away? But I have to, because I can't retreat. What am I going to do? I can't stay where I am because those guns come up. There's no hope. He has to attack. But how can he attack? Well, because of the Chickahominy, gives him an opportunity. Now, I don't know if any of you guys know Mike Gorman. I've heard Mike Gorman talk from the Park Service, but he says calling the Chickahominy a river is an insult to rivers, which is actually true. Normally, the Chickahominy, if you've been out there, it's a couple little streams and some swamp. But when it rains real heavy, it becomes impossible to cross. Very wide and impossible to cross. And in late May, it's raining a lot. So McClellan's presented with an opportunity. The guys north, sorry. How do I get to go back? There we go. The troops north of the river won't be able to cross south of the river if he attacks south. So he's going to attack Keyes and later Heintzelman south of the river at Seven Pines. You guys are all familiar with Seven Pines. That's Longstreet Camp, right?
Right.
All right, so anyway, it's poorly executed. Leads to no positive result except for a lot of casualties, one of them being Johnston himself, who was wounded twice on the 31st. He's carried from the field, never to return to the Army of Northern Virginia. So President Davis is there. He rides up to G.W. Smith, who's next in charge, and he asks him, "What are your plans for tomorrow?" And Smith, he doesn't really handle pressure well. He doesn't give him a good answer. So President Davis tells Robert E. Lee, his advisor, "Let's ride back to Richmond." And on the way back, he says, "General Lee, tomorrow I'm giving you command of this army, so make your plans." Robert E. Lee's never commanded an army like this. He doesn't know all these people. He doesn't have a staff. Next day, he takes over. And the first thing he does, starts to instill some discipline, and he builds entrenchments all around Richmond. We're all familiar with the entrenchments. And he gets laughed at. He's called Granny Lee, King of Spades. I want to read you something I think you'll find very amusing. Tell you what McClellan said about him. On April 20th, McClellan wrote this to the president. "I prefer Lee to Johnston. The former is too cautious and weak under grave responsibility. Personally brave and energetic to a fault, he is wanting in moral firmness when pressed by heavy responsibility and likely to be timid and irresolute in action." Did anybody ever get one wrong? Who's aware of Porter Alexander? So Porter Alexander is the artillery. He'll grow to be a famous artillery commander. But at the time, he's not. And he has a friend, and he tells his friend, "You know, for 30 days we've been watching General Lee build trenches around Richmond." He goes, I wonder if he's audacious enough to do this. And his friend, his name is Ives, tells him, "Porter, if there's anybody in either army who's audacious, it's Lee. His name might be audacious. He'll take more desperate chances than anybody in this war, and you'll live to see it." So he got it right. So Lee knows he has to attack, so he builds the trenches, not only for defense, but also to free up men to attack, because he's outnumbered. He also brings up men from further in the south, and he'll have about 90,000 men by the time this starts, the biggest army the South will ever have, at least in Richmond. So what he has to do, he's got to attack. So what he does, Jeb Stuart's ride. He wants Stuart to find out what the right flank looks like of the Union Army. And so Stuart goes out and rides around the flank and discovers this. This is a very busy map because it's covering several things. Right here, he discovers Fitzjohn Porter is at Beaver Dam Creek. And his right flank is in the air. It's not locked down anything. No terrain feature, no other troops. It's wide open. So Lee goes, okay, here's my plan. He calls together A.P. Hill, D.H. Hill, Longstreet, and brings Stonewall Jackson down from the valley. He rides them 50-some miles from the valley. And they meet at the Dabbs house over on 9 Mile Road. If you haven't been there, I would definitely go there. They meet there, and he tells them what the plan's going to be. A.P. Hill is going to cross at Meadow Bridge. Dagnabbit, sorry. He's going to cross at Meadow Bridge. I'm having a little trouble with this thing.
Which way are you trying to go?
Trying to go that way.
What are you doing?
The problem I'm having is if I keep hitting the pointer, I don't hit it just right, and I end up switching. Yeah, oh, in the middle, okay. That's at the top. He's going to cross at Meadow Bridge just west of Mechanicsville. When he does that, he's going to sweep this way at Porter and open the Mechanicsville Bridge for Longstreet and D.H. Hill to cross. They will confront Porter, while Stonewall Jackson will come down from the valley and come in behind Porter. He can do two things there. They can crush Porter, or he can head for, there's no other Yankee troops up here, he can head for the supply base. Either way, McClellan's got to retreat. It's a good plan. So Jackson says, I can be there on the 25th. And Longstreet says, why don't you give yourself a little time? You're coming from the valley. So he goes, all right, I'll be there on the 26th. So next day. So that afternoon, on the 26th, A.P. Hill crosses like he's supposed to, drives through Mechanicsville, clears the bridges, and faces Porter in Mechanicsville at Beaver Dam Creek. D.H. Hill and Longstreet start to cross. Jackson arrives at Hunley's Corner, which is about 3 miles up here, and he stops. This is going to be a disastrous week for Jackson. It's his worst week of the war. He stops at Hunley's Corner because he's following orders. And his orders are that when he comes to Richmond, he's going to meet up with D.H. Hill, and they're going to go around Porter's flank. D.H. Hill never appears, so he doesn't do anything. He stops. Some of his men hear firing 3 miles away, but he stops. He stays there. So A.P. Hill decides he can't wait anymore. And the reason he thinks that, there's only about 23,000 Confederates facing 4 corps of Yankees south of the river. So the divisions of Magruder and Huger are south of the river. And they have 4 Yankee corps. They're probably 75,000 men facing 23,000. They've got to attack. So he attacks on his own. And this is the attack at Beaver Dam Creek. If you go there today, the Park Service is a small battlefield right here. The rest of this is a Target shopping center, Chick-fil-A, and a Walmart. So that's lost forever. He attacks and he's beat back. Suffers about 1,400 casualties that day for no appreciable gain. So it's a tactical loss for the Confederates, but a strategic victory. Because McClellan has been hearing that Jackson's approaching, and now he sees this attack. So he tells Porter, you got to pull back and buy me some more time. Because I need 1 or 2 more days. He's in the process of moving his base from White House down to the James River. He needs to buy time. So Fitz John Porter, oh, this is the battle. That's just what the battlefield looked like.